get started. Thank you everyone for joining us. This is part of our academic speaker series here at Landmark College during the spring semester of 2024. The speaker series is sponsored by the Academic Affairs Department, including the three deans and our Vice President for Academic Affairs. And we recruit individuals from our community to come in and share some of their lived experience and expertise with our faculty, staff, and students who can attend. Tonight, I'm very pleased to welcome Dr. Cyrus Shaoul, who is no stranger to Landmark College, having previously served on the faculty here prior to branching out on his own and starting his own company. Dr. Shaoul is an entrepreneur, a software expert, a cognitive scientist who has experience both in scientific research and the commercialization of artificial intelligence technologies. Tonight, Dr. Shaoul will be talking about AI, or artificial intelligence. The meaning of the term AI is not clear to many people who are using it, and this is already causing numerous problems in our society. Tonight, Dr. Shaoul will cover the many possible meanings of the term AI, the best ways to think about various AI technologies and the medium and long-term implications of these technologies for humanity. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Shaoul back to Landmark College.
Thank you so much for that introduction, John. It's great to be back here in the O'Brien Auditorium on campus. Have many great memories of being in this room on campus with students, teaching here, working with my colleagues, just a lot of great memories. So thank you very much for inviting me. It's an honor to be here. And I wanted to just say that I really love the mission of Landmark College. I think it's a great place for so many students who have no other options or have difficult options ahead of them. And so I really want to congratulate the college on sticking to the mission and helping so many great students succeed. So I want to send my appreciation to everyone here about that. Today I'm going to be speaking on the subject of what does the term artificial intelligence mean and why is it important to understand what it really means or what it might not mean. And I'm going to try not to get too technical and jargony. This is designed for a general audience. So some people might be worried, do I need to understand advanced mathematics or computer programming to understand this topic? But fear not, none of those prerequisites are required to understand what I'm going to talk about. And if I do get into the weeds, which I do have a tendency to do and digress, I'd love everyone here to just interrupt me, raise your hand and say, slow down there, Cyrus. I don't understand what you're talking about. Because my goal is to have everyone follow along and understand what I'm talking about. If you don't understand, then I'm not doing my job. So please interrupt today. And I'd love questions during the talk, after the talk. I'll leave time for the questions. Other thing is I have tried to avoid using words on the slides as much as possible. I'm trying to model good behavior. I tell other people, hey, your slides are just full of words. You don't need to put words. And I don't want to make you guys read anything. So there are a couple of slides with some words, but I just want to say you don't have to read any of the slides, the words on the slides. They just act as sort of a nice backdrop. So without any further ado, let's get going. As John said, I do have a background in Landmark, but to put sort of maybe what I'm going to say today into perspective might help to know a little bit about my other stuff that I've done in my life, because sort of everything I think we do in our lives leads up to where we are at the moment and how we see the world and what we think about the world. So some quick points. I went to MIT as an undergraduate, majored in what's called brain and cognitive sciences, which is a major that is a combination of psychology, I'd say experimental psychology or cognitive psychology, and artificial intelligence. So I was lucky enough to get for my degree the ability to take all sorts of software development courses, artificial intelligence courses with some of the greatest minds in artificial intelligence at that time, as well as study the bigger picture about what is the human mind, how does the human mind work, how does the brain work, what's the difference between a mind and a brain, all these more deeper philosophical questions that was really a great experience. So I bring that to the table. That time when I was studying that stuff. Then I went and started a company called Digital Garage with some friends of mine, and did that for 11 years. And I got into the world of software engineering and internet search and scalable computing and all sorts of stuff like that. So I didn't do a lot of thinking or work on psychology and the mind and AI, a little bit of AI stuff actually during that period. After that, I really needed a change, so I went back to school, and between 2004 and 2012, I got a master's and a Ph.D. from the University of Alberta, which is up in Alberta, Canada, in the town of Edmonton, and I majored in experimental psychology. So that meant I was doing experiments on people, but I also did research and built mathematical models of cognition. And so I would collect trillions of words of text off the internet, and I would have my models read through all that text and then try to process language using this enormous database of text. And this is back in 2004, so this is before OpenAI existed, and before even the breakthroughs that made OpenAI and other things possible existed. So we were at the early stages of that, but I've been thinking about this stuff for a long time because that was my research when I was in graduate school. Then I did a postdoctorate stint at the University of Tübingen in Germany. And I did more research on language and in different, deeper ways. So, that was my specialty, was looking at language in a very mathematical way. And then I left that postdoc to work here at Landmark College. And while I was here, I did a lot of research with some of the people in this room on learning and on the modeling learning and looking at student emotion regulation and how that could help them learn better. All sorts of new open areas that I didn't really know in the beginning, but I learned a lot. So I did grow a lot in my time here doing research in partnership with the students. We had students who were research assistants, and we had students who were research participants, and it was just a great time, and I learned a lot and did a lot of interesting research here. But during that period, I also got the bug to try to go and build an artificial intelligence system, and I had a lot of ideas on how to do that. So a couple years ago, I co-founded a software company called Lila AI. I'm not going to talk too much about that today, but if you're interested in what we do, you can go to our website, lila.ai, and you can learn about what we do. And all I'll say is that we started the company with the vision of building a new kind of AI that's a little different from all the other existing types of AIs out there, and that does have maybe more human-like intelligence qualities to it. So that's sort of been our guiding light, is how do we make our artificial systems, software systems, more intelligent from the perspective of what we humans think makes something intelligent. And so, as John read, here on campus, I'm sure all the professors are dealing with the fact that these new tools are coming up, and if the work assigned is a writing assignment and there's a software program that can write pretty well, and it's hard to tell the difference between what the software is writing, what people are writing, if that's really the case, then it's a big challenge for education. So I know this is on people's minds, but that's not the only issue, I think. There's a lot more that we'll get into today, but it is a hot topic. So that's why I think understanding what this thing is that we're talking about is really important. Because if you're going to say, that's a bad thing, do not use that. What is that? What are you telling them not to use? How does it work? Is it really a bad thing? Is it really intelligent? These are questions that are sort of philosophical, but also really practical for everybody now. So I think we have to think about the effects of technology on our world, on our societies. For example, what effect did the telephone have when it first launched, or the radio? There were people who said when the first radios came out, this will be the end of civilization. The ability to have one person broadcast their voice to millions, we're done for. Turns out it didn't end civilization, but there is that reaction that new technology behaves in unexpected ways and can cause massive upheavals. So is this one such technology? That's the question I hope to address today. So yes, we're going to talk about the problem of understanding what this thing is that everyone's talking about and why it's so hard to understand what it is. And then what are the implications? If we understand what it is, we can actually now talk about implications. When you're saying this could be really a big deal, but if you don't know what this is, it's hard to know if it's going to be a big deal. So that's why I think it's really important to sort of, you could say, level set or build a common understanding, a ground that we can all stand on and agree. Let's talk about this thing and let's agree what it is and let's talk about it. So that's sort of my goal today. I don't want to teach you guys how to build artificial intelligence systems. I don't want to even get into the nuts and bolts about how this technology works. That would take a couple of years of training. We're just going to talk about how to understand this at a very high level, and maybe we can find a way to all agree on what it means, and then we can move forward. So that's my purpose today. Now, I'm going to ask for some audience participation, and I appreciate everybody chipping in because it's sort of lonely up here. I just need one sentence. What would you have typed to make some image generator generate this image? Can someone think of some phrase that would have made something like this? There's no right or wrong answer. What you want to make this? What would you have typed? Anybody? Rick?
What does the city of tomorrow look like? I don't know.
Great. Yeah. City of tomorrow. So it's futuristic. And does it look like a nice place? Yeah, right?
So I can't tell if it's a lightning in the back or if it's.
Well, it doesn't really matter what's in the back. You got. Oh, William. Yeah.
Does it look like a great, big, beautiful tomorrow?
Yeah, utopia. That's the word. Utopia. Yeah. So.
That song from Disneyland, written by the Sherman Brothers. That old Disneyland song.
That's right.
Great, big, beautiful tomorrow.
That's exactly what I was going for. So thank you, William. And so the point here is that artificial intelligence could be, in our minds, the pathway to achieve utopia. Some people think that. You've heard probably this idea, like, we'll never achieve utopia unless we have something like AI to help us. So that's great. You've also seen this kind of stuff. I'm not even going to ask anybody to see what to generate that, but there's the Hollywood tropes, there's the movie Terminator, all of these things like artificial intelligence will be the end of humanity. It's the existential crisis type of idea that humans will be turned into something that is extinct by their own creation. Very smart robots or software, right? So you have both sort of sides to this. And sometimes you ask people they'll say both, yay, we're going to use AI to do amazing things, but it'll kill us in the end. So it's really weird that you have this kind of schizophrenia about AI. It's the greatest thing in the world, it's the worst thing in the world at the same time, right? And so that's something that I find interesting and also sort of points to the fact that it's not well defined in people's minds. If you knew what it was, maybe you would know which one of these futures it's going to lead us to. Or maybe you'd have a better idea. But because it's so unclear what it is, both are possible. So let's try to clear things up. Before we do that, there are people out there who say stuff like this all the time. Now, I'm not going to attribute this to one person, but whichever way you go, utopia or dystopia, the consensus in the media and a lot of other thought leaders is that the advent of artificial intelligence is akin to the advent of electricity or fire. That's a pretty big deal. How many other things can we say are akin to that in our world today? Maybe the internet? But this seems to be even more of that hype than even the internet. So we got to figure this thing out because this hype is important to figure out. We don't want to get sucked in and go down this road of hype when maybe it's not really worthy of that. Maybe it is. We don't know. So, question. What is this? And William, you already went, so he has to be someone else. Who's that? What's your name behind William?
Dylan.
Dylan? What's this, Dylan?
An orange.
It's an orange. So, this is one of these interesting things, right? Did anyone have any other thoughts that this was something else other than an orange? If anyone had a different thought, raise your hand. Oh, what do you think, Christine?
Lemon.
Lemon. Maybe you're colorblind. I think it looks pretty orange to me. But that's okay. Lemon, we all agreed it's a fruit. So we're all pretty close on that page, right? No one thought it was a car, right? Was this? No? No cars, right? Okay, good. So, second picture. What is this? Apple. Anyone have a different idea other than apple?
Rayburn.
Well, you getting more specific? Yes, thank you. So, the point I'm trying to make with this is that, when we see things that we all know and they're pretty unambiguous, a word comes into our head, orange, apple, and it's pretty much human consensus, the whole world. Now, we're going to get to what happens next, but this is the warm-up, okay? So, now instead of putting a picture, I'm going to put a word on the screen. So, can anyone read this word? Anybody?
Ant.
Ant, great. Now, what does that word mean? You said ant. What does that word mean?
It's a little bug.
Little bug. Little bug. Little insect, little bug. Anyone disputing that? Yes.
We don't actually know it's a word. It could just be 3 letters.
Could be. Could
The
be.
end of a word or the middle of a word.
Yeah, could be. Okay. So already there's a little bit of uncertainty about what this could be, but let's keep going. Now, here we have the next thing, AI. So compared to the pictures of the fruit and the word ant, does this make you feel any different than those did? And when you were trying to sort of get at it, like, I'm looking at this thing, I see these shapes. Oh yeah, 2 letters. Oh yeah, I think I know what that is. I'm going to hypothesize that this creates a different feeling than the other things we just looked at. And let's get deeper into why. Why does that not create the same, like, 6-legged small thing? You're like, yeah, I could even see my hand. I could see it crawling around if I want. I can imagine an ant on my hand. I can imagine the taste of an orange or an apple. But this is very abstract. Now, we deal with abstractions all the time, and yet this is particularly difficult. So let's dive in. I need one person who's going to promise to only say one sentence. Can anyone raise their hand? I need one person who will say only one sentence. Who's going to be my guinea pig? Yes, Jimmy. In one sentence, what does this mean to you, artificial intelligence?
Better computer processing?
Okay. And that, there's no wrong answers. There's all answers are correct. This is the first thing. Short, sweet. Better computer processing. And that's part of it, right? And yet, it's probably not all of it, right? So, all of you probably had your own sentences that you were coming up with, and that's interesting because they're probably all different. So the consensus about the apple broke down. And let's figure out why that is. Now, there's a word, I'm not going to use too much jargon, but there's a word in my field of psycholinguistics called semantics. Semantics is the science of meaning. And it could be linguistic meaning, it could be non-linguistic meaning, but just meaning. So in that kind of way of looking at the universe, this is very traditional. I don't agree with this chart, but this is just a standard sort of textbook chart. You've got an apple in the world, you've got a sign somewhere that says APPLE that people can recognize, and then inside your brain, something happens. When you see the letters, you might imagine a fruit, you might imagine the taste of it, or if you see the apple, you also might imagine a fruit, or you might even look at the apple and some reason spell the word apple in your brain. You can do all these things. But the real point is that our brains are constantly interpreting the world, and a meaning is arising in our mind. It's a very hard thing to think about. It's very, psychological. It's not something that we think about a lot. Like, I've got some meaning arising in my head. Wonder where that came from. It's a weird thing to think about. It's sort of very meta, but it's important. So, we agreed that apple, everyone had no confusion about apple, but whether when you hear the word apple, some people think about that, right? So there is actually this idea of multiple meanings to everything, really. There's nothing that I think has a singular meaning. So I was trying to make you guys think that apple was one thing that there's no way to confuse. But if I said, I'm going to go get an apple, maybe you're not going to get a Windows PC. You're going to get a Mac, right? So, apple already, very ambiguous. Now, who can tell me what this is? This is another little AI generated thing. If I said, my daughter, she's the apple of my eye, right? Then the apple is a girl, a woman, right? So already we see that language is slippery. Language is flexible, language is extremely powerful, but it also can be misleading. Because if someone says, so he's talking about the apple of his eye, did he put some fruit in his head or something? You know, it can be confusing if you don't know English that well, if you're a new English learner. You hear someone say, yeah, she's the apple of my eye. Doesn't compute, right? So language is complicated and very flexible in a beautiful way, but challenging way. So what if you work for Amnesty International and you never touched a computer in your life? Yeah, AI. That's where I work. I work at AI. I work at Amnesty International. There's even something called airborne interception. And so if you work in the Air Force, you might think AI is that. So even the letters AI aren't so clear. And so let's dive in and slice up artificial intelligence into two halves. We're going to put the first half on the back burner for a minute. We're going to go to the second half of the term, intelligence. Let's dive into intelligence. Who likes intelligence? Raise your hand if you like intelligence. Somebody doesn't like intelligence. All right. Noted. Now, this is a little bit of how your brain, you know how that old commercial, this is your brain on drugs, and there's like a frying pan, and this egg is all frying. This is your brain on linguistics. This is your brain on semantics. And what this means is that we have a very complex and very fast thing that happens in our heads whenever we hear a word or we see a word. And we know this because there's been a lot of experiments on the brain and how it processes language. But there's an automatic, completely unconscious, subconscious process that happens. And it's connected to the way that we understand the meaning of language. So if I just show this word on the screen and you guys are looking at it, I am sort of pushing you to sort of, and all your brains to do something. Try to figure out what this means. And not just what it means in general, but what it means in the context of what we're talking about. So all of your brains are doing that. You may not be consciously aware of your brains doing it, but they're turning around. They're all these brains figuring out, why is he putting intelligence on the screen? What does it mean here? What's going on? And in that process, there's this idea of coactivation. And what does coactivation mean? It means that when you activate the meaning of intelligence, you cannot stop the process from spreading out to your other parts of your linguistic system and activating other concepts. And so you're not consciously aware of them, but if I did an experiment, I could show that the connected concepts are more readily accessible to your consciousness after you've seen this word. So if I show you a word, after you see intelligence, I show you the word dump truck, not a lot of coactivation, probably it's not so available. But if after seeing intelligence you saw the word wisdom, because it's already been percolating and the whole time intelligence has been up here, wisdom has also been sort of spreading around and coactivating. Wisdom's available, it's there. It's called priming. And so it's primed like a pump when you prime a pump, right? You have to prime the pump before you turn it on. I'm priming wisdom by showing you intelligence, okay? That's very much giant amounts of evidence in experimental research on the brain and language. Priming is real. So, what else got primed by intelligence? Maybe aliveness. Most things that we think of are intelligent are alive. Maybe correctness. If you're intelligent, you're going to do things right. So there's an idea that now correctness is activated. And these are not words, these are more groups of concepts. And all the words connected to those groups of concepts. It's a very broad activation around intelligence happening here. Maybe consciousness. You know, when you think about intelligent things, they're pretty conscious. Now maybe a frog to you is dumb, and you think, well, frogs don't have any consciousness, but maybe they do, if it's a very smart frog. So consciousness could be something that's happening. Smartness, flexibility, sentience. All these things are unconscious to you, but percolating in your brain just when you hear the word intelligence. Now, why am I going to all this nauseating depth? Because as soon as we throw in a word artificial and we start talking about computer software, your brain's already got all this stuff going on, and it's going to start linking these concepts to whatever you're thinking about, like a chatbot or a search engine or a Tesla that drives itself from point A to point B. This idea of an animate, intelligent, anthropomorphized thing is going to reap the benefits of all this priming and coactivation of all these concepts in your brain. And that's where we fall down. That's our danger. That's sort of the human nature, right? Our human nature is to build connections between knowledge. But if you shouldn't be connecting things, but you can't stop yourself from connecting things, you're going to connect the wrong stuff together. Anyone have any questions at this point? Is this making sense? Okay. Artificial. So really it's the other way around. Artificial intelligence. I did intelligence artificial, but let's see what pops up with, and these are just things that I throw out. These aren't the right or wrong ones. I thought about what could be popping up in my head when I think of things as being artificial. Unnatural. Sure. Precise. Artificial things are man-made, so they're very precise because humans make things that are very precise, right? Okay, great. Predictable. Yeah, machines also are very predictable. They do exactly what we tell them to do, so it's going to be predictable. Indestructible. You know, artificial things, unlike flimsy organic stuff, probably hard to destroy. Maybe robotic, mathematical. So what I'm trying to say, oh yeah, Shanna.
First word that comes to mind for me is fake. Me too.
Yeah, fake. I ran out of time to put all of them on here, but sure, fake.
It's like
Fake.
very different in nature than the other precise, predictable, and
So let's just say you had fake.
biased.
Well, no, I mean, everyone's going to be different, right? But let's just say you had unconscious thoughts about fakeness. You weren't consciously aware of them. But so when you hear artificial intelligence, you might think fake wisdom, right? Because the wisdom was here, right? There was wisdom back here, flexibility. You can see that there's all these things that you could draw lines between every one of these words and these clouds around each of these words, and you're getting all sorts of crazy things happening. And maybe that's what we're thinking about when we hear the word artificial intelligence. Now I hope you're starting to get an inkling of why this is a really weird term and why it's going to cause a lot of confusion. People come to the table with their own experience, their own prejudice, and they hear artificial intelligence, they have no idea what it is, and they think, well, maybe it's a fake wise thing, or it might be a really strong, indestructible, and very correct thing, right? So if that's the case, that might be right or wrong, but it's going to be different. That's where we're getting this incredible diversity of opinion and disagreement, because we're just throwing in people at this idea with no background, and they're just guessing what this thing means. So here's another big problem with the way that we think about the world as humans. Yes? No. Right? Wrong. Present? Absent. You can make a million of these things, right? But what comes out of this way of thinking is, it's called the dichotomous way of thinking. And what you do if you're doing this way, and this is a very important thing for our species to survive. Sometimes you gotta say it's either A or B. For example, you're standing around, you look, you see something run at you. Is it your buddy or is it a lion? It can't be both. It can't be 50% lion. It either is a lion or your buddy. If it's your buddy, you give him a hug. If it's a lion, you better run like hell. So we've evolved some abilities to be very accurate sometimes, or as accurate as we can be, and fast at making this binary decision. And then we start seeing the whole world sometimes as either yes or no. But it turns out there are some things in the world that you don't want to do that to. For example, I will throw out intelligence. Is it either an intelligent thingy or an unintelligent thingy? Is it 0 or 1? For intelligence, it doesn't make any sense. And yet, I would say that a lot of people will say, yeah, you can tell if something's intelligent or not. I could tell. That rock, not very intelligent. My friend Jane, she's very intelligent. But then you say, well, what about a bacteria? Well, the bacteria knows how to reproduce, and it can like find a way to kill someone if it can infect their cells. Sort of intelligent, actually. And then you get into these, really, you realize that there's a whole spectrum of things. And it doesn't have to be just intelligence. You could say, well, artificialness. If something is completely made of cells, living cells, maybe it's zero artificialness. And if it's only made of inorganic elements, maybe it's 100% artificialness. But what if you have someone with a pacemaker? You know, they're not totally natural anymore. They've got a machine inside their body. So they're not 100%, they're not 100% artificial, but they're not 0% artificial, right? So you start getting these ideas that if you look at the world, it's dangerous to split things into 2 categories or 3 categories. Sometimes, it doesn't matter how many, categorizing stuff can be dangerous. And in the idea of thinking about ideas, I'm going to throw out that, you know, AI is something that people do start thinking that way, and that's where you get dangerous. So if we agree that, let's say, intelligence can be a continuum and naturalness can be a continuum, well, let's just throw some dots on there and see what we get. If something is not so intelligent and is not very natural, maybe it's my blender at home. And if it's really intelligent but not very natural, maybe it's a chatbot. And if it's really natural and intelligent, maybe maybe it's all you people here. You're all up here in the top right corner. So, you know, now what if we had to map out the whole world and put everything in the universe on this kind of naturalness versus intelligence chart? Would it be possible? Is it easy? Should we even think about this? Is this dangerous? And yet, unless we do this, we can't really say anything about what's intelligent, what's an AI. Because the AIs are all going to be right here. But they're not all there. There's some over here, here probably, right? It's not like there's going to be there's going to be some spread. There's got to be, right? Because we agreed that we don't want to categorize stuff. So it's going to vary a lot. And so that's the interesting thing. Yes, Shauna?
Would it be accurate to say on that vertical axis that artificial's at the bottom and natural's at the top and it's a continuum?
That's correct. Yeah, 0 is totally artificial. Yeah.
Because I was just curious that the word artificial isn't on there, but it's implied.
I could have put artificialness too, but I like nature a lot, so I just went with naturalness. I had a choice.
Okay.
I could only do one or the other. That's a binary choice. So we've got now this idea that, well, there's going to be some natural intelligence out there, and that's going to vary from high to low and everything in between. Then there's going to be artificial intelligence out there. That's also going to vary from high to low and everything in between. How are we going to navigate this? How are we going to figure out how we want to think about this? Because now it's getting really hard to really think about this and decide, is my dishwasher, you know, it knows how to clean those dishes and it knows when they're dirty and it adds a little more water and soap sometimes if they're not getting them clean enough. Maybe my dishwasher is intelligent, but it's you know, like lower on the scale, but it's still pretty intelligent in some ways, right? So now you're thinking about things a little differently, I hope. Now, the word intelligence does have its challenges. Like, who's ever taken an IQ test? Anybody? Sure. That's supposed to be something that you put someone through it and they come out the other side and they put a number on it, and that's how intelligent you are. Intelligence quotient. It's a number. Now, who thinks that they actually are useful, these numbers that come out of these IQ tests? Anybody think they have any use? We got some weight, we got some this. So there's a whole field about people who study this stuff, and it's a very debatable topic. There are some really strong points in scientists' minds about why these are useless, that actually have no relevance to anything in the real world. Other people think that they're really useful. Can we give an IQ test to an artificial software system? That's another big question. But I think we're going to have to measure intelligence better. We need to know exactly how intelligent these software things are, because that might change how we want to treat them. Do you want to let something of a certain level of intelligence to do a certain task? If it's not up to the task, you shouldn't let it do it. Like, let's say, run the ambulance service. We need someone to run this ambulance service to make sure that everyone gets to the hospital on time. Now, it might be a great software program that could do this better than any human, but what if it's not that great? We think it's great, but it's actually a little dumb about some things. Then you don't want that to run the ambulance system, right? So that's where we need to start measuring. And the other things about intelligence is, when we use the word, we think about creativity. I think truly intelligent people or software needs to be very creative. That to me is like a must-have. And an imagination. I mean, you can say, hey, Cyrus, you used some AI to make this picture, and yes, I did. But did this system have the kind of imagination that we would call useful human imagination? Or is this just smushing together the imagination of pictures that this system looked at millions and millions of human-made pictures and sort of smushed this together? Is that really imagination or not? So that's sort of a question, I think. Adaptability. When you throw a person into a new country, a new place, to give them a new board game to play, they can learn that really fast. So they're very adaptable. You can learn how to drive a car in a day at age 80 if you have to. That's amazing. No software can do that yet. So that's the adaptability that is, to me, a pillar of intelligence. And yet, when people think about how we're going to measure intelligence, you got to measure all this stuff too. It's not easy, right? Composition, synthesis, it's a little more complicated, but you know how to do the A and you know how to do B, you don't know how to do C, but if you compose some pieces of A and B together, you could learn quickly to do C. Those are things that are really hard for software to do, but people do it all the time. We're really good at it. So have I confused everybody completely right now? Have I, yes, oh, sort of half confused. Okay, thank you. Any questions so far about where we're at right now? We're sort of confused, and that's okay. We're going to try to get out of confusion, but I've sort of showed, I think, that it's really hard to measure something called intelligence. It's really hard to understand what it really is. It's a very broad term that's confusing, and we've also now have these things called AIs, or AI systems, that might be intelligent, but we don't know for sure. So let's keep going. Let's see how far we can get in the next little while. And we'll leave time for questions. But I want to zoom through a little bit to get to the ending. And the history of AI, well, these guys invented the word AI. John McCarthy, Marvin Minsky, two professors, back in 1956, nearby here in Dartmouth College in Hanover, New Hampshire. They had a summer project. Let's get together and figure out what intelligence is. Artificial intelligence. And so that's sort of the birth of the word AI, right here, near us. And I won't read this, but this is what they wanted to do that summer. And they thought they could do it in a summer. It's like, yeah, this doesn't seem too hard. Summer of '56, we're gonna figure out how to make a machine that's able to do nearly human level stuff. Turns out it was a little harder than they thought. So I'll read this, and this is sort of from that era. They defined it at the beginning as the construction of computer programs that engage in tasks that are currently more satisfactorily performed by human beings because they require high-level mental processes such as perceptual learning, memory organization, and critical reasoning. So it's a little different from yours, Jimmy, a little longer. They got to add a couple of sentences. And so by this definition, who thinks that our current crop of chatbots are now doing this? Anyone think that they've achieved this? No? Not yet? Yes? 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 You think they have? Okay, good. I like it. We have difference opinion in the room. That's great. I think it's going to be a hard thing to say for sure. Like I said, measurement's really hard, but I think we need to think about this. Yeah, Todd.
I think that the way that Microsoft refers to their product as Copilot is somewhat, to me, informative. In that I wouldn't say the key term in there that I see is more satisfactorily performed by human beings, because the AI with the absence of a human being, I don't think is more satisfactory. But I think that a human with AI can be more satisfactorily, tasks can be more satisfactorily performed with a human being. than a human being without an AI.
Yeah. This is all true, and yet other people would disagree with you on that. So we're in a debate mode right now, and we're going to debate this, I think, for the next many years. But this is where it started, and I think things have shifted. And so this is about the shift of meaning. So back in 1956, AI had this idea that these people in Dartmouth thought about. And then between 1956 and today, a lot of stuff has happened. We've got search engines, right, that can search the whole internet and search every piece of knowledge we've ever made. We have AI agents that, can search and get flights for us. We have generative AI, which is doing all this text generation. We've got robo-taxis that can drive us around without any human drivers, and so on and so forth, right? These are all things. So what I'm getting at here is that it started out as a very simple thing. We've done a lot of stuff with it, and now we're stuck with the baggage of that term. Does it apply to all these? How do we wrap our heads around it? It's a challenging situation. Now, I'll tell you what I tried to get this to generate. Moving the goalposts. When you ask these generative image systems to generate things, they make funny things. So what I'm trying to say is that early idea in 1956, there was a goalpost, and they said, if we can just do this and this, we'll have an AI. And they got there, and then they said, you know what? It's not that smart. Let's make it harder. Let's call AI something else and then we move those goalposts further out, and then we'd start doing all sorts of research and development to make a software that's even smarter and more intelligent. And that's happened every year since 1956. So one of the goalposts that came up was a thing called the Turing test. Who's heard of the Turing test? Alan Turing, famous guy. And the Turing test is very simple. If you can trick a human that sees a text chatting on a text keyboard, the other person they're chatting with on the text, they believe that it's a person. And if it's not a person, if it's an AI system, it's a robot, then they got tricked and the robot wins and passes the Turing test, right? There's a lot of problems with it. I won't go into the problems, but let's just say that's not really a great way to measure intelligence in anyone's book now, I think. And because these chatbots have all now been able to pass it. And yet, are they intelligent, right? So that's we're stuck with that problem. Now, there are people who have been working on this, and I want to give a shout out to particularly Timnit. She worked at Google in 2020, and she raised a flag. She said, not only are these things not intelligent, they're biased. And she discovered a lot of bias in these systems, where if you talked about doctors, the AI thought it was a man for some reason, right? A lot of bias like that, racial bias. So she called out Google. She was working for Google. She was their head of ethical AI. They fired her because they knew that this is going to be a hard problem to solve, and they didn't want more internal criticism. So she's been doing stuff independently after that. Just check her out. If you want to search her up later, you should see what she's doing. She's doing great stuff. Another story, Blake Lemoine, back in the summer of 2022, he started saying, hey, I work at Google, and I've seen this new AI thing, which is now out. It's called Gemini. You can use it today. It's actually sentient. It's conscious. So we've created a conscious entity that's alive and conscious. And Google fired him. So two people got fired by Google for saying things that were controversial about AI. And why did that happen? Well, they made these chatbots, they released them. They're these language models that have some sort of extra stuff on top that make them good at talking to us and making them sound like they want to help us and they have answers. And so there's an interesting article, I put a link down here if anyone wants to look at it later, an article about mentalism. Who's seen a mentalist do a cold read? You go into a room and they pretend they're psychic and they trick people and think they're psychic. Has anyone seen these mentalists on TV? Yeah? So this article made a list of 6 steps of a mentalist tricking people into thinking they're intelligent. And then in the article it said, what if you looked at chatbots like OpenAI and others? It's actually the same thing. The trick is, how do you trick people into thinking that a system's intelligent? Well, people who use chatbots have a propensity to think that chatbots are smart. The scene is this little browser where they're typing things in, they get answers back. The prompt establishes the context, like, tell me about the way that swallows migrate. So you've set your own context, like that's the context. Anything comes out after that, you've already set yourself up, right, to get the right answers. You test yourself, you do subjective validation, you ask more questions about swallows, you get more info that looks right, and then you think to yourself, wow, this chatbot thinks it's alive. So we have a lot of things like we think things are alive that aren't alive. And so this chatbot experience is designed to fool and con people into thinking the thing they're chatting with is a living being that's intelligent. And that's very dangerous because they're not alive, they're not intelligent, and if you do certain things, you can prove to yourself very quickly that they aren't. So I'm going to wrap up with a couple more points because I want to leave time for questions. Who's heard of this idea of AGI, or artificial general intelligence? Has anyone heard of that? What does it mean to you?
What does it mean to me?
Yeah.
It's a still somewhat of a speculative model for where AI is going to go in the next 20 years or so.
Okay, and so I guess you could say it's going to be more general than the current AI, which is less general. Could that be?
I think so, but if you want to talk about Gen AI, that's the real modeling part of this, which is really about pattern matching, right?
Yeah, so intelligence is more than just pattern matching. I would agree with you on that. Is it or isn't it? Maybe not. Well, that's a question. Is it more than just pattern matching? I'm going to say I think it is more than pattern matching. And so I don't think that this generative AI will ever achieve general intelligence. General intelligence in this wonderful picture, you have an AI that can play chess, but can also read literature, but can also do mathematics and physics, but can also control a robot body and run and jump and swim. You know, and you have to have the same thing doing it. That's the generality. Right now, you need 20 different AIs to do all those things, and they wouldn't do it very well or as well as a human. Humans do all those things and can learn them all, and they do it better than sometimes any of those. Now, some of them, they'd be worse, like playing Go, right? Or chess. Sure. Board games, you got an AI that's really good at that, better than people. But that board game playing AI sucks at driving a car. Whereas the board game playing human could be a very good driver. Definitely have the potential, right? So that's sort of this generality problem. And that's where the question is, will we get there with what we're doing right now, or do we need to change course? I'm going to say we need to change course. Superhuman intelligence, again, first you have to get general and then superhuman general. That's even harder. You can have superhuman narrow stuff like who can calculate digits of pi? Yeah, sure. An AI could calculate more digits of pi than any human in their lifetime. But that's not super. I'm going to skip these two and just go to the future. I think that the future of humanity is going to depend on AI technologies, but it's not going to be just a technological problem with a technological solution. I think there's more to this than just technology. So that's something that people in the tech world don't like. Like, we'll just fix the bugs, we'll make this run faster, and then we'll be okay. But I don't agree with that. I think this clarity, this idea of, what is intelligence, what is artificial intelligence, what does these words mean? If we could clear that up and have the whole world agree on that, just like we all agree on what an apple is and what an ant is, then we could actually have a good conversation about the ethics of AI and the morality of AI and where we should invest and what kinds of software should we make. But unless we agree on what AI is, it's going to be hard. So the real big question is, do the upsides of this kind of advanced AI outweigh the downsides? And I'm not going to tell you what to think. You can come to your own conclusions. I still believe personally that the upsides will outweigh the downsides, but I might be wrong. So the main thing for me I'm trying to figure out is I'm going to go into the world, our children will go into a world full of autonomous things. It could be you try to fix some problem with your plane ticket reservation, and there's this agent, which is a software thing, and you're stuck in a loop and it never lets you change your flight. That's a very minor sort of inconvenience, but if it's something much more critical, like something that's controlling our power grid. Now, humans may not be as good as some AIs at deciding where to send power in the power grid, but if something goes weird with that software, suddenly the whole country goes into a blackout for a week, that'd be very bad, right? So before we turn over the keys to the power grid to some AI system, we have to trust it. And that's, to me, the biggest problem in the future, is that trust, it's going to be a big gap. And that the big advantages, so the power grid situation gets to, let's say, climate change. If we had a really great AI system that could help us with the power grid and optimizing generation of power, we could reduce CO2 levels a lot, more than any human system trying to control that power grid could. So that's a great path forward. Like, we're going to use AI to make better batteries and, optimize windmills and all these things and control the grid so that we can have a better future without a climate crisis. But before we give the keys to the AI, we have to trust it. And right now, I wouldn't trust OpenAI's chatbots to run the power grid. I don't think anybody here would. So my solution that I'm working on, this is what we do at Lila AI. We're inspired by the way that human learning happens. And we feel that the only way to really get an intelligent system is to try to emulate the way that the only truly intelligent systems that we know, humans, learn. And so we look at human development and we think, how does this human turn into the super intelligent creature that we know as a 3-year-old baby or even an 18-month-old baby? They start out doing this stuff. And so what we are throwing out there at Lila AI is we want to have the software explore and play, learn through play and exploration and trial and error, and then learn things about the world so that when time comes, it can really be, in some ways, similar to the way human intelligence works. And as to how we're doing that, that's a very technical, deep thing. Again, it would take a couple of years to get everybody on that page, but it's possible, we think, and we're working on it. So, last things, I think in the medium term between the next, well, let's say now to 50 years from now, I think that we're going to see a lot of ups, fits, and starts. There are going to be some problems, things will break, but I think AI on the whole will help us avoid a lot of crises that are waiting for us, the human race down the road. And I think climate, existential threats of nuclear war can be averted. I do think that global pandemics impacts might be reduced or mitigated, and many other positive things are going to come out of this, I think. Long term, I've tried to make a prediction on what's going to happen in the next 300 years because of AI. I can't. No one knows what's going to happen in the long term. But I do think that we may achieve something that I dream of, which is a mutual respect for these software systems that we make and a collaborative culture where you don't say, okay, this is just going to be a human thing or this is just going to be an AI thing. I think it's going to be people and systems working together all the time. So that's maybe a bit utopian, but I think that's possible. And if we do that, then I could see avoiding the climate crisis, reducing a lot of human misery in the world. A lot of robots can do jobs that are dangerous and dirty, and let's relieve people from having to do those jobs. And prevent wars. If there's no reasons to fight wars and the wars are not going to benefit anybody, maybe we'll stop fighting them. Again, maybe a little bit utopian, but that's where I'll end it today. Thank you very much for your attention, everybody, and hope you enjoyed it. Have time for questions. Yes.
I'm hopeful, and I'm curious about your thoughts on this, that I think that we're in a technological boom right now, and that slowly but surely technology will start to fade into the background as it becomes more well integrated into just daily life or daily activities. Where do you lie in that prediction? Do you think technology will be less front and center and slowly fade into the background as it advances?
I do think it will, and it seems if you look at the history of technology, that's been a pretty consistent trend, right? In the beginning, you had these heavy brick-like cell phones, right? And you had to remember all your numbers and dial them by hand. So it was pretty impractical and pretty, it wasn't seamless. And now you have a pin on your shirt or your watch, and you say, call mom, and it calls your mom, and you just talk, and you even forget that it's a miracle that you can do that. So
Bye, Cyrus.
thank you for coming, William. Take care.
And thanks for inviting me here.
Oh, my pleasure.
To listen to your speech, your lecture.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
You're welcome. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. So it's not, to me, I mean, it is sort of dangerous sometimes when things become too, you start depending on them so much that you forget they're there, and then sometimes they stop working, and then you're sort of stuck. It's like, how are we going to get out of this mess? We were depending on this AI to do all this stuff for us, and suddenly there's a bug in it that didn't show up for the first 10 years, and then on the 11th year the bug showed up, and all the people who wrote this program have retired. This is the kind of stuff that does happen in the real world. So there's a danger I see in it becoming too pervasive and too invisible, and losing touch with the fact that it is just technology and it can break. So that's sort of, I have a divided opinion on that. I think it's good that it becomes intuitive and pervasive, but I also think it's important not to forget that it is machinery that we build, and like anything we build, it can break and it will break at some point. Any other questions? We have 3 more minutes, so time for a couple more questions. Yes?
One of the things that I often think about is if you look at transportation, among the most automated forms of transportation is commercial airline travel, which has pretty much the highest safety record possible. And when you compare, say, automobile travel, we lose about 1,500 people a day to human-operated automobiles. And when people talk about the acceptable risk of automated vehicles, if you were to say we're going to lose 1,500 people a year due to people driving automated vehicles, that would be like absolutely positively no, but it's probably a 300 plus fold decrease in the total number of traffic fatalities. So clearly there are some giant obstacles, not just at the hardware, software, infrastructure, but I have to wonder about these 10 to 50 year projections when you have these like absolutely positively clearly there are systems in place that have demonstrated the ways that collaborative AI systems with human implication make things so much safer. But how does that happen? At what level can we get changes that would be sufficient to prevent wars, changes sufficient to prevent child labor?
Yeah, that is a challenge I think about a lot, and there's a risk, as you're pointing out, I think a little bit, that you go too fast and you put technology out there that's not quite ready. So you do, let's say, have some people who have been killed in automobile accidents where the automobile was under fully autonomous control, right? That's happened. But again, compared to the number of people who die in non-autonomous vehicles, tiny, tiny, tiny fraction. And yet that could prejudice the world against the adoption, which would then in the future prevent the saving of hundreds of thousands of lives, right? So this is really tough thing. And so what I've been trying to spread is the idea of, let's go as fast as possible, but still not too fast, so that we can create safer and even better AI that's almost infallible, so that when we do release it to the world, it doesn't have the unintended consequences that could make public opinion turn against it. So that's, I think, the right way to do it. It's hard, it's not easy. It does mean that we can't move as fast as we'd like, but I am really of the opinion that if we try things that end up causing even tiny amounts of harm, it's going to really bias the world against AI. So it's a hard call, but I don't agree with people who say, sure, some people got to die for us to test our cars out. It's just the only way we're going to get there in time. That to me could set us back much, much more than if not. So that's how I feel about it. Any other questions? We don't have more, like 30 seconds. Any other questions the last 30 seconds? Okay, we'll wrap it up. Thank you everybody for coming. I really appreciate your time. And I'm here. If you want to ask me one-on-one afterwards, I'll be hanging out here. Happy to answer any questions one-on-one. And if you have any other stuff, check out my website, send me email. Great to communicate more that way. Thank you very much.